Hello everyone, my name is Zach, and just give me one moment while I pull up my stream on my phone. Sorry for the little bit late, I'm like a minute late to that. I was kind of sending a message. Just go ahead and go into display on my phone. Just screen timeout, and then we are going into Twitch. And see if it works. Be good. So today, I'm just gonna go ahead and have my phone hanging up right there. Today we are actually going to be, once again, we are back here ready to discuss my creative project that was recently published by my university. And if you want to read this for yourself, all you have to do is Google Chico State Scholarworks. I've been going there a lot, so it actually came out relatively quickly. And just go into Merriam Library, which should be the first result on the page when you Google Chico State Scholarworks. Click visit Chico Scholarworks, and you just search my name, Zachary Bennett, and my result is the only one that comes up. So 26 views already, 11 downloads. Last Thursday we read the critical introduction. Today we are getting started reading the main book. That's the wrong thing. The main section of the story. I'm trying to find where. Is this it? Yes. If I am slurring my words, I really do apologize. I'm have really bad cotton mouth right now. And something I do want to state is I pulled a muscle somehow Monday morning, and it's just been very persistent, and actually spread to my back from my chest, or it was originally to my back. So this may be a stream that I'm gonna have to end off early because of the fact that my back is just kind of giving me problems, and it's just sitting in this chair for a long period of time. It's not exactly comfortable. But we're going to be getting started on the extract of the thing. For this section, we're going to be reading the first 3 perspectives, and we're going to be dissecting it. This first section focuses on the character of Hefe. He's one of my main antagonists of this series. Deep within the bowels of hell rests an area resembling a warped version of an office. Dried blood decorated the walls, and the floor almost appeared fleshy, giving the space a disturbing look. I'm actually going to drink more of my coffee. There was only one door into this office, which provided the only mode of escape. There were no windows, yet the room emanated an eerie red light. A bloody man was bound, his hands tied behind his back, and his face was bleeding profusely. Meanwhile, a figure stood over him with a horribly disfigured face, wearing a patchy brown suit, who was beating him. His face looked like it was heavily burned, and it caused his mouth to constantly remain open, as his upper lip hung slightly ajar. He was the type of person who didn't care who he hurt, because everything was a means to an end to him. The door opened, and an overweight, balding man came through in a gray suit and approached the scarred figure. Hefe, what did this poor fool do? The overweight man did not care whether the prisoner lived or died. It was just unusual for the scarred man, Hefe, to pummel someone so relentlessly. Hefe stood up and wiped the blood off his knuckles. This fool tried to steal from me, Beckett. Hefe turned to Beckett and growled. It's almost time. Beckett withdrew a silver locket from his pocket and rubbed it in a brief trance. Almost time for what? Instead of immediately answering Beckett's question, Hefe slowly sauntered over to his desk and pulled out a cigar from the drawer. He took the time to clip the end, ignited it, and took a long drag. He then walked over to the prisoner and blew the smoke into the prisoner's still bleeding face, which caused him to cough. Hefe smiled a wide grin, which appeared slightly distorted from the facial scars, before turning to Beckett to take another drag. Remember, Hefe excelled. Remember what I had you do a couple months ago? Beckett placed a locket back in his pocket. You mean when I delivered a message to Alec Lowe? His face wore a grimace, and he rubbed it in irritation. Hefe droned. There are reports of Alec getting ready to launch an investigation into the Primal Order. I heard it from a reliable source. He will need our help to succeed. Beckett ran his hands through his sparse black hair. Reliable source? You mean your contact within the Order? Hefe approached Beckett, causing him to take a step back. You know why the Primal Order is so powerful? It's because they have extensive connections in heaven and hell. I'm getting tired of angels messing around in my business. You will find Alec Lowe when he begins his investigation and guide him into my path. My plan cannot work without him. Beckett remained uncertain. He knew Alec did not trust him, and Beckett blamed Alec for everything that went wrong in his life. Beckett was hesitant to speak initially, but he eventually found the courage to voice his concerns. I don't know. How are you sure this is going to work? Hefe untied his prisoners cautiously before he muttered under his breath, Nice guys always finish last. He then spoke to the prisoner. You have until the count of 5 to escape before I kill you. The prisoner stood up as Hefe uttered 1. The prisoner ran to the door. 2. The prisoner escaped the room as Hefe had a gun drawn, already primed and ready to fire. Hefe slowly lowered the firearm and smirked. He would not allow himself to fall into the stereotype that humanity had applied to all demons. Hefe muttered, but in the end, good in itself is subjective. Beckett gave Hefe a confused look. Why did you spare him? Because he meant nothing. I don't blame him for trying to steal from me. He had no choice. He was just trying to survive. If you're going to blame someone, we should blame the Hyde Agency for robbing Hell of all its leadership. Hell has turned into a land of chaos where the dead have control over Hell. A couple thousand years ago, the dead were punished for their actions, but no more. That notion had died when Samael was captured 1,000 years ago. Balance must be restored if we want to create change within Hell. Taking down the Primal Order is the first step to restoring that balance, and for that to happen, Alec Lowe must be brought to his side. Go, Beckett. Find Alec Lowe. Beckett smiled as he prepared to leave. He was proud to work for Hefe, and he longed to finally get his revenge on Alec Lowe for ruining his career. Everything that went wrong in Beckett's life, he felt Alec was to blame. He held his locket once again, an anniversary from his lost wife, and an anniversary gift from his lost wife, and rage began to boil. He was condemned to suffer in hell while his family was in heaven, and he only had a few items to remember them by. The items he had on him when he died. He wanted to see their faces one more time, but he couldn't so long as he was stuck in hell. So the least he could do was to get his revenge on the one who led his life to ruin. Beckett smiled a crooked grin as he was finally going to get his revenge on the one man who ruined his life. And the one guy who was going to make it happen was Hefe. At the end of the day, Beckett always referred to work for the winning team. So before we move on to the next perspective, I have a couple things I wanted to address here. This is meant to be like the prologue of my story. In fact, when I get to writing book 2, when I'm finished with book 1 is published, I'm actually going to rewrite this slightly. And I want to change the title of this section from Hefe to Prologue. What this is really kind of meant to do, there's something I do want to kind of discuss because all my books will be kind of doing this type of thing. I remember when I took a creative writing class, a creative writing fiction class in Butte College, my community college I took was in from 2014 to 2019. And when that class, I was actually taught of the basic story structure. I want to find like an actual good thing. This is a good one. So here is actually this is kind of like a different one. There's a couple different variations of this. The one that I was taught actually had an additional thing called catalyst. So basically, what I was kind of taught is something that I do kind of want to kind of trying to find one that kind of. This is kind of like what I was kind of taught. It's a little bit different, but basically, what my story is basically gonna be about is actually kind of taught. My creative writing instructor actually taught me about the catalyst and the exposition. She was actually kind of talking about the status quo. So the way that she kind of described this sort of plot structure is it begins with a status quo, like a normal life that your character is living, like that type of thing. Then the catalyst happens, which sets the character on a journey. And then we kind of go into the rising action, the falling action, that type of thing. And I wanted to experiment, and but this is something that I did for book one, where instead of opening up with the status quo, I opened up with catalyst. Like a moment of conflict that kind of sets out the story of overall. And it's something I did in book one, and it's something I'm doing now. I'm gonna be doing throughout the thing, where I kind of want to focus on. I have like a brief, I have a moment in my story. I just kind of burped a little bit. Sorry. I want to have a moment in my story where it kind of opens up with uh, like either an antagonist kind of setting up the plot of the story, or like a climactic moment, like a death of a character or something like that. In book one, I actually opened up with the assault of like a secure facility owned by Hyde. That kind of ended with the slaughter, essentially, of all the inhabitants. And it was like meant to be like a very gory, a very almost like intimidating scene where the reader is actually able to see how dangerous these individuals are, my antagonists are. And it's really kind of meant to like kind of serve to like gain the reader's attention and kind of make them want to know more about what happens afterwards. This plot line with Hefe requesting essentially with him sending Levi Beckett to go after Al, kind of sets up the events that will take place within part one of this book. There are 3 parts with each book I'm making, and kind of like this, there you could say that there is essentially 3 acts to this. It's as what my story essentially focuses on. It was initially designed to be a trilogy of trilogies of novellas. Basically, instead of like 3 books in a trilogy that I'm working on right now, it was gonna be 9 novellas. And I decided to compress that and kind of focus it on into like essentially kind of like this, where it's like 3 acts. But instead of acts, essentially like an entire plot line that kind of goes up and down, like through the like traditional like plot structure, where it kind of reaches a conclusion and sets up to the next novella. But that's kind of what I'm trying to do is throughout this entire project, it's gonna have like its own like little plot structure before it leads up into like the second part. And the second part will have its own plot structure, and then it'll lead up into the third part. And that's what this I'm trying to do with this. Is it's gonna be like the catalyst that kind of leads into the main story of this first part. And it's really been kind of an experiment. I actually kind of found out that this strategy does work. A lot of people who read this project when I was developing in my master's in my grad school, they actually, a lot of people actually kind of like this. They kind of like this beginning as it kind of sets up Hefe as an antagonist and introduces Beckett in like an interesting way. Something I do want to point out is in this story, I kind of name dropped an organization that will be important later on, known as the Primal Order. And the Primal Order is essentially like an antagonistic group within heaven that essentially seeks to create and control the apocalypse. And another thing that was mentioned here is a notion of creating a balance, restoring balance between like heaven and hell. A lot of this topic of balance is something that's brought up a lot in my series, and it's something that won't be resolved until the end of the 9th book, essentially. where essentially the conflict will be more or less ended, and there will be kind of more so like a little bit more order to the to how things work between angels and demons. But the topic of balance that I introduce here is trying to find it. It is really kind of, a lot of people have their different interpretations about how this balance would be made. A lot of people believe that creating the apocalypse will create a balance, but something that I won't be able to illustrate here is Hefe thinks that freeing Samael from his prison, the devil from his prison, will create the balance, which is kind of like an odd way of looking at it. But in his eyes, Samael is the only one that can like bring order to the chaos of hell. And you'll find out more about what my version of hell is like as I continue to read this project. But it's essentially meant to be like a fallen society with all the leaders of hell gone. Hell has kind of devolved into a world of chaos where it's just like endless conflict. It's like survival of the fittest in its purest sense. Okay, moving on to Alec Lowe. Alec stood in front of a large courthouse in Yaba, one of the two twin capitals of heaven. The courthouse was designed with a mixture of marble and gold. It was beautiful, but it was out of place in a city like Yaba. Yaba was mostly comprised of stone and wood, which had changed very little in the thousands of years since it was built. He was about to embark on a second mission as a hired agent, which may also be his most important one. Alec withdrew his wallet to examine a picture of his son Jacob, and a tear began to form in his eye. Jacob was the reason why Alec became a hired agent. He died 9 years ago, and he was supposed to be in heaven with his family, but thanks to a secretive organization, Heaven, the Primal Order, he was sent to Purgatory instead. As Alec gazed at the courthouse, he was reminded of a promise he made to Spade, an old adversary defeated a couple months ago. I will change how the High Agency operates to make things better for both demons and angels. So this is kind of like a spoiler of how things, sort of like the ending of book one, and it's something that it's kind of one of the last changes that I made in revisions of this project. At this point, it was an empty promise, as Alec had no idea how he was going to create that change, but he hoped he would figure it out as he worked on his new mission. The courthouse of Yaba was where the Elder Council, the leaders of heaven, convened sporadically to discuss various problems that existed within heaven. Alec finally began to scale the ornate marble staircase when he noticed a line of people of varying ages and ethnicities, extending out one of the set of two double doors. The other set was untouched. Alec assumed these people were applicants, hoping to gain one of the two positions of elder that remained open. Alec ignored the line and passed through. He did not envy God and his one remaining elder for the task of sorting through all these candidates. As Alec entered, he noticed a line ended partway through with a man donning white and gold armor halting the line. A Heaven's Guardsman, the police force of heaven. The armored man recognized Alec and gave Alec permission to enter the room where God resided. Alec realized that all these people were prohibited from beginning their interview until Alec met with the Elder Council. Alec wondered if he should have left more quickly as he entered the Elder's chamber and presented himself before God. God was never hard to miss. He was the only one who sat above the Elders, although now only one sat below him. Alec made eye contact with God and saw that he had the guise of a 12-year-old boy. God quickly transformed into a young adult with a white suit and blue shirt and short blonde hair. Below him sat an older man with long black hair and a little facial stubble. He ran the Heaven's Guard and oversaw the protection of the residents of heaven. Traditionally, one of the other two elders would have run the High Agency and supervised the safety of humanity. The last elder would have overseen the residents of heaven to ensure no problems arose among them. Now one elder was solely managing all three roles. Before I continue, I wanted to kind of discuss my character of God that I kind of portrayed here. You'll see more of him as I continue reading. But basically, he has different personas that he freely changes into depending on his mood. And basically, how these personas work, just trying to explain it a little bit, like before we get too far into this. He changes into a persona of a child, like a version of a child. When he is bored or he's trying to be humorous, he changes into a adult, like a 20-year-old adult, when he is in his normal appearances, and he changes into an elder, like an old man with a long beard, so like Gandalf or Dumbledore, when he wants to appear wise or and in control, like guys want to appear like wise as a leader. And he does, when he changes into these personas, his personality changes with him. When he changes into the kid, he literally regresses his mind to that of a child. He behaves like a child. When he changes into an old man, he has a mentality of someone who is mature, someone who is wizened. And his personality completely changes depending on his persona. But he's also kind of he pretty much like really only, is this a typo? Never mind. He really only changes on those personas as a way of him just trying to cope with something that will see kind of later on. And I don't want to kind of get into too much of God's character because there's so much of him that we haven't seen yet. But he has actually one of the few characters that actually kind of remain constant throughout the development of this project. The only thing that really changed with him overall was the changing of his motivations, his goals, his desires. Because that's something that one of the most recent changes I made with him actually this year. We actually decided on a goal and like an endpoint that I want the character to kind of follow and pursue. This is something I already read. Alec approached the two men with a smile on his face as he casually quipped, "Hey, God." God ignored Alec's light-hearted tone. "Alec, you came. We need to do this quickly. Many people are waiting for an interview." The black-haired man countered, "Although feel free to take all the time you need." God chuckled as he adjusted his suit jacket. "Unfortunately, Jonah, these people have been waiting for a while, and it would be rude to have them wait for too much longer. Anyway, Alec, following your request to investigate the Primal Order within Heaven, the request is denied." Alec blurted out, "The Primal Order is an organization in Heaven." Jonah quickly interrupted Alec as if he anticipated Alec saying something like that. "There is a reason why agents are prohibited from operating in Heaven, and why they are only allowed to work on Earth." God transformed into an old man with a long gray robe. He frequently changes his appearance based on his mood. God would use his child persona when he is bored or trying to be funny. The form of a young adult for everyday situations, and an elder for when he wanted to appear wise and in control. He never stayed in one form for too long, and not that many people would know that God was like this. A substantial number of Heaven's residents often overlooked him as some strange or random individual. I'm just gonna drink some more of my coffee. I have a really bad cotton mouth right now. I may need to brush my teeth for a second time. Second time today, I should say. As a substantial number of Heaven's residents often overlooked him as some strange or random individual. Those who figured out who God was usually made the mistake of thinking him to be an all-knowing and all-powerful entity. This often led to their biggest mistake, as God often hated it when people made this assumption. So that's another thing that I kind of changed from like how God's portrayed here versus how he was portrayed in the Bible. In the Bible, God is described as all-powerful and all-knowing. He's capable of doing some incredible feats. That's something I did want to change here. In my story, I opted to kind of make a nerf God slightly, where he's not like all-powerful and all-knowing. He doesn't know everything that will happen. He doesn't know everything about the individuals around him. And he's not really as overpowered as God is presented in the Bible. He does have his own skill sets, but he never really uses like any of his abilities in combat. He's a pacifist in this form. He's a pacifist as a persona of God. And the reason why I say as a persona of God is God was actually like the title God was something he created, as well as the personas. 1,000 years ago in my story, and it's something that wasn't really kind of brought up here in the story because this plotline of God creating his persona as 1,000 years is something that I kind of created like relatively recently. I kind of decided to kind of God decided by making him not all powerful and all knowing, just to kind of make him more relatable to the reader and try to make him more likable. I think I did succeed in that. I kind of felt that if I made God all powerful and all knowing as he was portrayed in the Bible, he would kind of like appear like a self righteous dick. I can kind of see the possibility of God saying, essentially, because I just kind of just wait for the surprise. Like if God is all knowing, that he would know like what person will do what and when, and there'll be essentially no risk involved. If someone were to try and like if someone were to kill a Hyde agent, like if a demon were to kill a Hyde agent, God could quickly see that coming and work to prevent the agent's death. There will be no risk involved if I made God that type of character. And so that's what kind of why I kind of nerfed him a little bit, to try and make him more relatable to the reader, and to make him more likable as well. God leaned forward in his seat and gave Alex a stern look. We cannot permit you to investigate them in heaven, but we did come across a demonic, pseudo-religious cult on Earth that has some connections to the Primal Order. You want to take them down, I get it, but we need to do this by the book. Busting down doors and interrogating random civilians won't get us anywhere. Alec inhaled deeply. You said that there is a reason agents can't operate in heaven. Why is that? Jonas spoke up. The light that Hyde agents use and the primitive form of light within every resident are different. Excuse me. Just kind of had a little hiccup, and my muscle spasm just started. Ow. So just as a quick reminder, I pulled a muscle on Monday. I kind of brought this up at the beginning of the stream. Pulled a muscle on Monday, and I felt like it was like right under my rib cage here. I don't know if you can't see it, but it's like right below where my lungs would be, like right under the rib cage. It feels like, and every single time I breathe in, like it used to be like whenever I breathe in, like it was just like a sharp pain in my side, and it actually kind of spread to my back Monday night when I tried to lie down in my bed and sleep. So kind of been dealing with muscle spasms for the past 4 days. So apologies. I had to stop myself and just kind of like kind of trying to soothe the pain. I honestly kind of hope this muscle spasm will be gone soon. I do not like kind of like feeling this way. Let me continue. The light within every citizen wears some immortality, while an agent's light is weaponized to fight against demonic entities. Suppose a resident of heaven is exposed to an agent's light. This can cause them to involuntarily give up their immortality, making it possible for them to die. So while we are kind of bringing up the concept of light that Hyde agents use, light was a concept created by God, and it was essentially the main power force that the Hyde agency uses to combat demons. And there is a counter to that, being the demons' power of darkness that Samael created as a way to counter the light. And the power system created with light and darkness was actually kind of inspired in some way by the concept of DNA, good and evil. It's really kind of meant to be like a sort of like a limitless, a power that's really kind of only limited by your imagination, by the creativity of the agents or myself as writer. And basically, it's like an intangible form of power that resides within the individual that they can control and manipulate in different ways. But only Hyde agents and God is actually able to use it. God can actually use light in a more powerful form because he's the one who created that ability. He's the one who created that power system. Hyde agents are kind of more limited because they can only do so much with it. And it's really kind of meant to be like a power of light and darkness I created is kind of meant to be like oil and water. It's things that are both like hazardous to the other. Like light is as effective to darkness as darkness is as effective to light. Both sides can be hazardous to the other. It's really kind of not meant to be like a one side is more powerful than the other type of thing. Both sides are equally capable of causing harm to the other form. Got leaned back in his chair. Do you understand now? We need to do this by the book. Investigate the cult. Get any definitive identification of a member on the primal order. We can go from there. In a traditional situation, you would have been informed of the rules early on. You may have had experience, but you still have a lot to learn about being a Hyde agent. Alec defiantly protested. He did not like this decision. And what is stopping me from ignoring your orders and investigating the primal order on my own? God gave Alec a stern look. If you are asking what if he went rogue, I would not recommend it. Going against the orders assigned to you will make you an enemy of the Hyde Agency, and we will be forced to apprehend you and punish you. Jonah leaned forward and growled, You aren't seriously considering doing this type of thing, are you? If you are, then I misjudged you, Alec. Alec was overcome with guilt. He did not want to be labeled as an enemy of God or the Hyde Agency. That's the type of that I need to fix. So, Hyde, whenever I have like Hyde Agency or Hyde agent, I always like to capitalize the A as it kind of refers to like a proper noun in my opinion. So I'm trying to like make it like be representative. Like when it's agent on its own, it's lowercase, but when it's Hyde agent or Hyde agency, the A is capitalized, and that's something I want to try. Would want to change when I to cover this section when I'm writing book 2. No, I apologize. I'll investigate the cult and find a connection to the Primal Order. See, it's 132. Excellent choice. God lifted his palm up, causing a portal to open behind Alec. Go through. Hugo's waiting for you. So, the portal that he is creating, that God is creating, is essentially like a way for like a travel system for Hyde agents. I don't know if I have addressed this. I kind of simplified like a lot of things. I kind of treated this project as if people would already kind of know my story from the events of book 1. But basically, one of the devices that Hyde Agency has at its disposal, there's like a brain that Hyde agents use that when they focus light into it, like just by simply holding up their hand and channeling the light into their hand, the ring is able to create a portal that allows them to travel to any destination that they could think of. And it's really kind of meant to be like a travel mechanism for hiders. They can already go to anywhere in the planet so long as they think of it as a destination. Alec walked towards the portal silently. A part of him was happy to see his old friend Hugo Winters. Another part of him was upset that he still had a lot to learn about being a Hyde agent, despite all he had been through. Alec was not a traditional agent, as that this is something that should be lowercase, as that would imply he would work with a group of veterans to learn the ins and outs of being a Hyde agent from them. His pride almost led to his downfall. Alec assumed that because he excelled in the various aspects of being a Hyde agent, he could handle his encounter with Spade on his own. That was his biggest mistake, and because of his pride, he missed out on receiving the specific training he would have received. Alex hoped eventually he would gain a better understanding of the Hyde Agency in time. So there's another inconsistency. This is actually capitalized, which it should be. For the previous one, it was lowercase. In time, as he passed through the portal, eager to see Hugo. Alex did not anticipate party streamers to greet him as he passed through the portal God created and entered one of the Hyde Agency's mobile headquarters known as the Cottage. The streamers were the work of the cottage's extreme leader, Hugo Winters. So before we go far into this, a cottage is kind of like a specific type of mobile headquarters. Basically, every mobile headquarters has like a specific theme and a title attached to them. And book 1, it kind of opens up with the destruction of Sanctuary, which is kind of the largest mobile headquarters that is frequented by the best of the Hyde regions. The cottage is a smaller location that is kind of represents a kind of like an old like 1920s style home. And there is another thing that I'm planning on creating, but only in book 3, the second trilogy. where I'm planning on creating an area that I'm calling the Oasis, which is kind of meant to be like a Middle Eastern like desert sort of like town, like an adobe building, and in the center of the building is like a pond with a waterfall and that type of thing. And that's kind of like an idea that I had for another mobile headquarters. Basically, and as I said before, they all have their own unique designs meant to kind of tailor towards like the designs of the certain characters, the sort of agents that kind of live there. Since Alec grew up in the early 20th century when he was alive, he the cottage is kind of more so like a mobile headquarters tailored to him because it's like has an environment that Alec is familiar with. The streamers were the work of the cottage's eccentric leader, Hugo Winters. Alec gave Hugo a weird look as Hugo stood in the center of a large room, decorated with old furniture, holding his arms in a grandiose fashion. Hugo always had a flair for the dramatic, but he also understood the appropriate times to be eccentric and to be a leader. Hugo wore a jean jacket, jeans, and a black t-shirt. He had wavy brown hair, blue eyes, and a bright white smile. When the streamers had settled, Hugo lowered his arms and met Alec's gaze. What, too much? Alec laughed a bit and thumped his flask in his pocket, tempted to take a drink, but decided not to. A little bit. Hugo stuffed his hands into his pockets, sauntered over to a nearby couch, and sat down. Alec looked around the room and was happy to see that not much had changed. Every mobile headquarters was different and was in a different dimension, a realm somewhere between Earth and heaven. The mobile headquarters served as a primary base of operations for every hide agent, another inconsistency that is going to bother me. However, the cottage was one of the smallest as it was meant for one of the two teams of agents. Alec always felt at home in the cottage because the environment mirrored what he lived with when he was alive. An environment holding early, this should be 20th century decor. 19th century is the 1800s. 20th century is the 1900s. This is a kind of a typo that I didn't realize I made. That's actually kind of a mistake that I make a lot. I often kind of forget that, and because it's so easy for me to think that like the year we live in, like in the 21st century, because it's like starts from 2000, the year 2000 and 2009 essentially. It is easy for me to think of it as the 20th century because it's 2020, 100 years, I guess you could say. But it's actually the 21st century, and I often kind of get that confused, so that's a typo that I need to fix. Alec walked over and sat in a chair opposite of Hugo. Do you have any leads on where I should start? Hugo looked up and smiled at Alec. I think it would be good to ask Elizabeth Hart to assist. Alec was taken back by pleasant memories of his investigation into Spade, in which Elizabeth was integral. That is not a bad idea. Is she still living in the outskirts of Parson, Ohio? Hugo nodded his head in confirmation before giving a solemn look. She recently got fired from her job as an elementary school teacher for not coming in for a month. She was fired because of us. Her aid in our investigation into Spade ended up causing trouble for her. She may not be keen on joining. Oh god, my nose is so stuffed up right now. Alec stood up and thumbed a silver ring with a tan stone in the center. This loud hide agent's another inconsistency. It's going to bother me. To travel from place to place via portals that respond to according to the user's thoughts. Alec felt like it had been years since he last used this, even though it had been a couple months. Alec held his palm out and focused his thoughts on Elizabeth's home, and a bright yellow portal formed. Alec passed through without any reconsiderations. He arrived at the foot of Elizabeth's driveway. The house was an old farmhouse originating back from when the town of Parsons was founded. The yard was large and unfenced, and the driveway was unpaved with a single car in the driveway, an old Honda SUV, but something seemed off. The front door was wide open and one of the windows was burst open. A pit formed in Alec's stomach. There had been an attack. Alec drew his revolver and held it low. He focused his power of light in his eyes to activate the agent's ability of flow. This and this is improper spelling. I really kind of wish I spent more time fixing up the small details. I didn't even catch like all these little typos when I was writing this. I was editing this in my grad school, and allows him a chance to predict the enemy's movement and combat. Alec had no idea what happened, but he prayed he would not find Elizabeth dead. As Alec approached the front door, he noticed the patches of darkness lying in the doorway and scattered around the property. Alec's fears had been confirmed. Elizabeth was attacked by demonic entities. Rage began to form within Alec as he slammed his fist against the doorframe. He could not understand how Elizabeth was taken without the Hyde Agency knowing. Elizabeth served as Alec's guide, a position respected among the Hyde Agency, and which was meant to assist agents working in a foreign time. As Alec entered the house, a scowl formed on his face. He felt like he wanted to punch something, or he wanted to kill the ones responsible for this. Elizabeth was family, and family was everything to Alec Lowe. Alec looked around at the chaotic scene, furniture overturned and porches fallen. The television was smashed and knocked over, and several holes were made in the plaster of the wall. As Alec froze in his tracks, and sitting on the wooden floor was a single bloody handprint. Alec knew this was Elizabeth, and he began to get choked up. The Hyde Agency should have protected her. Alec looked around, eager to find a clue that would help him find Elizabeth. He spotted a fragment of a red cloth next to a shard of glass, lined with blood on the floor. The cloth resembled the end of a tie, and Alec assumed that Elizabeth tried to fight back. Pride began to form within Alec over his protege. Hugo had trained her to hold her own and fight so she could be of assistance to Alec in his investigations. Alec picked up the tie fragment, but as he was hunched over, he smelled an old musky smell that was oddly familiar to him. It was the smell of an old cologne, and he couldn't figure out where he had encountered that fragrance. A knock on the door startled Alec as he stood up and quickly stuffed the tie fragment in his pocket. In the doorway stood his old partner from when he was alive, Levi Beckett, a formerly corrupt detective. Now he was referred to as a Dupree Demos. I thought I misread something. A human who had died and was sent to hell. Beckett entered the room, and a look of concern was on his face as he looked around before he walked over to Alec. Beckett had an open black suit with a white t-shirt open at the top. The fact that Beckett showed up here after Elizabeth was attacked filled Alec with suspicion. He had no idea what Beckett wanted, but he knew it wasn't good. Hell of a mess with this dump. What did you do, Proby? Beckett gave Alec a deep, fake smile. If you had something to do with this, Beckett, I swear to God, Alec growled. He trusted Beckett as about as far as he could throw him. If I had something to do with what? What happened here anyway? Beckett made a wide gesture to highlight the room. This is the home of one of my close friends and my great-granddaughter. If you killed her, Alec pulled back the hammer of his revolver, waiting for any indication of Beckett's guilt. I'm pretty sure my employer wouldn't be too happy if I killed some girl. He spent his entire career operating in the shadows. I swear I did not have anything to do with this. Alec holstered his revolver for the moment. He knew words like I swear and I promise had little weight in Beckett's mouth. Employer, huh? This wouldn't be the same guy you mentioned when we met in my encounter with Spade a couple months ago. The very same. Now that you are beginning your investigation of the Primal Order, it is my job to guide you in your quest. My boss has an interest in the Primal Order's defeat. Did you know they also have pull from within heaven as well? My boss may put on a brave face, but that is just a facade. The only person who should have control over hell is him. This was the first time Alec had heard of any form of leadership within hell, and that the Primal Order had any influence over hell. How far does their reach extend? So, you are trying to help me? What do you gain from this? Beckett had a false look of concern as he dramatically gasped. Alec, I am shocked that you would think I'm doing this for my own benefit. I'm only doing this because my boss told me to. We have a common enemy. And I can be helpful, more helpful than a human could. Alec grabbed Beckett and pinned him against the wall. That human is 3 times the person you ever could be. The moment I find out for sure that you had something to do with Elizabeth's disappearance, I will make it my mission to take you down. Beckett gave a hearty laugh, not even the slightest bit intimidated by Alec's threats. As I said, I only want to help you. Ask me anything and I will give you the answer. Alec released his grip on Beckett and growled. There was a demonic religious cult operating on Earth that may have connections to the Primal Order. Do you know who they are and what they worship? Beckett chuckled a bit before answering. You must be referring to the Church of the Mother of All. They are the only religion in hell that is worth any merit. They worship Lilith, the first demon, the mother of all demons, and the embodiment of the power of darkness. Alec was stunned and took a moment to respond. I will need to verify this, but at this point, Elizabeth comes first. As soon as I am sure of Elizabeth's safety, I will consider working with you. So before we go on forward, people may actually kind of recognize the name Lilith. Lilith was only mentioned. It was mentioned in the Catholic Bible. She was actually the kind of the first partner, first female that God created alongside Adam, and she ended up. I can't remember what happened to her, but she was eventually banished from the Garden of Eden, and God ended up creating Eve to replace her. Hold on. I really hope I'm not coming down with something. She is kind of meant to be like a more so like a mythical figure in this story. You don't really kind of see her, but you kind of hear her, if that makes sense. Like, she doesn't really have a physical form. She instead kind of has like a more spiritual form, if that makes sense. And you'll kind of see more about that when I get to work, when I develop the story as a full-on book. But think of Lilith as sort of like that voice in your head that tells you to do bad things. That's essentially what she is. Alec prayed that Beckett had nothing to do with Elizabeth's disappearance, as if he did. There was nothing in the world that could stop him from putting a bullet in Beckett's head. Anyone who threatened or harmed Alec's family was quick to draw Alec's ire. Alec passed through the portal to return to Hugo with new things to think about. Alec had heard stories about Lilith. She was somewhat of an important figure in Judaism. She was also an important figure in Catholicism. I may need to do research to double check that. I just can do that right now. Was Lilith in great spelling? Yeah, she is. She is actually first seen in Judaism. She was seen in the. She was actually kind of in the Torah's creation story. She did have a role in Catholicism. Just want to verify this. But she was essentially meant to be like Adam's first wife. Before she was kind of banished and God created Eve in her place. She was the first woman created before Eve in the Bible and was banished from the Garden of Eden for not complying with Adam. That's kind of like the reason why that's actually the reason why that she kind of left. She was kind of banished. From what I understand, she wasn't really kind of obeying. It was kind of like almost kind of like misogynistic viewing of that, but she wasn't really kind of listening to Adam's requests, and she was instead kind of like doing her own thing. And because she was essentially trying to be independent, not really kind of adhering to rules, God was forced to banish her. At least that's what I understand from Lilith. I may need to do more research into her. I've not actually looked into her since I developed this project, but maybe forgetting some things. Alec wondered how much of the stories of Lilith were fabricated by man and how much is fact. He hoped that Hugo would have answered as he opened a portal to return to the cottage. Alec returned to the cottage to see Hugo pacing anxiously back and forth, and Alec knew that Hugo had learned what had happened to Elizabeth. All Hyde agents' activities were constantly monitored by the Hyde agency in case an agent found themselves in trouble that they could not get themselves out. Alec approached Hugo, who stopped in his tracks to give Alec a look of concern. Alec, I'm sorry about Elizabeth. Who was that demon who interfered? Alec collapsed in a chair and withdrew his flask to take a long drink. He is a ghost from my past. He has redeemed us named Levi Beckett. He was my partner when I was alive. Hugo shook his head in disagreement. He may be your partner, but he's not a Redeemos. Not anymore. What do you mean, Hugo? Alec questioned. A fatal concern was on his face. Redeemos are only called Redeemos so long as they still maintain the morals that define humanity. Even a cold-hearted serial killer has a line he will not cross. This is actually kind of my personal belief. It's kind of one of my theories in a life that I have. Basically, every individual has some sort of line that they aren't willing to cross, that they aren't willing to commit. Like for example, like a serial killer may be willing to like kill like an adult, but he would not be willing to like kill an infant. That's sort of like the most extreme like example of what a serial killer would be willing to do and what he would not be willing to do. And that's kind of like my main theory of this. And my main thing is when someone is able to cross that line repeatedly, they essentially are kind of described are more monstrous than what they were to be. Because at least if when they had that line they wanted to cross, they could in theory be reasoned with. But once they are no longer hindered by that moral line, then they are kind of lost, I guess could say. The power of darkness that resides within every resident of hell corrupts any and every individual exposed to it. The longer a human is exposed to the power of darkness, the more their concept of right and wrong diminishes, until they have nothing to prevent them from saying no to the temptation darkness offers. Levi Beckett has been dead for close to 100 years. He may be human, but he's more demon than Redemos. You cannot work with him, Alec. Alec gave Hugo a stern, unwavering look. My priority is saving Elizabeth. Potentially working with Beckett comes later. Hugo shook his head in disagreement. As much as I would like to agree with you, it is more important to continue your investigation into the Primal Order. If what we know about them is true, there remains to be a bigger threat to the Hyde Agency. Don't worry about Elizabeth. I have contacted one of our best agents to rescue her. You may know them. The S-Class agent, Charlotte Matthews, and her group. Before I get kind of discuss, I have a couple things I want to discuss relating to this thing. There are different kind of classifications of Hyde agents within my series. It kind of goes from C-Class to B-Class to A-Class to S. S-Class agents are known as the best of the best in the field. Alec, at the start of his trilogy, was a C-Class agent. It was the lowest agent in his tier, but after his submission against successful mission against Spade in book 1, he essentially has been like kind of viewed as a B-Class agent. There's a slight promotion in his skill. And while we're talking about this concept, Charlotte Matthews is actually a character that I actually kind of gave the name to while I was in my university taking creative writing classes. She is my attempt of writing a strong female character. I remember so many times hearing that a lot of writers, a lot of like TV writers, a lot of movie writers, a lot of book writers tend to have trouble writing strong female characters, and Charlotte Matthews will be my attempt at that. In my opinion, writing a strong female character is the same as writing a strong male character. The problem is that I notice people are having is especially true for like the Marvel movies and for the recent Star Wars movie, the sequel trilogy. A lot of writers are afraid of putting their female characters in dangerous situations and moments of conflict, and they seem to kind of develop their characters in a way where essentially there's no risk involved in what they do, and this essentially creates what a lot of people refer to as a Mary Sue, where essentially they receive little to no resistance in what they say, like everything kind of goes in their favor, that type of thing. And it's kind of like something that I was always kind of like frustrated with. So how are you planning on writing Charlotte Matthews going forward as my attempt at writing a strong female character? She is someone that has her own goals. She has her struggles. She essentially works towards being accepted by her friends and her peers, and she essentially is disrespected and kind of shit on by everyone around her. She is someone that always wants to be there for those close to her, but her work as a Hyde agent is kind of like atypical. She is very reckless. She is kind of prone to anger. She like literally, I had the idea like when I'm writing her trilogy, the opening scene of book 4 essentially opens up with a bar fight that Charlotte, a bar fight on Earth with humans that Charlotte instigates. That is essentially like an opening scene that I had in mind for Charlotte Matthews, where she kind of prone to anger and she doesn't really have like a best control over her actions, and that's something I kind of wanted to focus on. She is gonna be like a very interesting character, I feel like, and I hope that she kind of turns out well in people's eyes. Alec remembered meeting Charlotte in his last battle against Spade, who was the first to jump into the raging battle and the Hide Agents and the Demons of Purgatory. This is also not true, not really completely true. She was the first S-Class agent to jump into the raging battle of the fallen agents in Demons of Purgatory. There were already like lower class agents already engaged in the fight trying to keep the demons busy, but she was among like 20 or 30 S-Class agents that were kind of gathered to meet to rendezvous with Alec in the first book, and she was the first of the S-Class agents to jump into the raging battle. At this time when I wrote this, I had not finished book 1. I had not gotten to this point of the story. So when I did get to that point, I did kind of make that little change where there was actually more high agents engaged in the Bible than essentially 20 or 30 that I had initially. She was hot-headed but confident. Alec was unsure what to think of her two companions. What surprised him was a moniker Hugo used to describe Charlotte, S-Class. A title given to the one of the strongest and most successful agents within the Hyde Agency. Alec knew he could put his face in someone of her caliber. This is also something that has changed a little bit. She has actually already been described as a S-Class agent at the end of book 1, so that's something that I need to kind of fix. It's kind of like an inaccuracy now. Alec felt reassured by this knowledge. Then I guess I may have no choice but to follow up on the lead Beckett gave me, and possibly work with him when I have more information. Alec began to walk out of the room, prompting Alec to mutter, "Be careful, Alec. Working alongside demons often ends in betrayal." Alec left the room, hoping that that Elizabeth will be safe from wherever she may be. He also tried to create a game plan for how he was going to handle the investigation going forward. If he was forced to work with Beckett, what would it cost him? Alec knew that Beckett still held a grudge against Alec for exposing Beckett as a dirty cop. Why didn't Beckett show any sign of resentment? Alec knew Beckett was up to something and he needed to watch his back in case he was betrayed. Stable Ron the Wee, what are you doing? I am reading, discussing and analyzing my recently published creative project for my master's, that I submitted for my master's degree. And I'm basically analyzing and discussing my creative work. Something that I kind of wanted to do for a while while I was waiting for my project to be published, and now that it's actually published, I'm just analyzing my own writing. So that's what I'm doing right now. Alec would not die before he was able to save his son. It's gonna be the last section that we read today. It's actually kind of a short section. And it's kind of has like a comedic moment. Just trying to see how many pages it is. It's kind of long. I honestly kind of thought it was like a 3-page document. A 3-page section. God was in his child persona, head resting on his hand as he listened to the applicant in pure boredom. The applicant had his hair braided in long locks and a tie-dye shirt with a pair of baggy jeans. He looked more like he had just left Woodstock rather than coming to an interview to apply for one of heaven's highest and most respected positions. The worst part was he came in unprepared. His resume was a mess and he had no idea what an elder even did, much less what it represented to heaven. Jonah was the only one who was patient and constantly prodding the man for answers. "So, why did you want to become an elder?" Jonah murmured as the applicant gave him a blank stare. After a moment of silence, the man gave an open-mouthed smile as he responded, "Because it would be cool, bro." Jonah straightened up and put his resume off to his right. "Well, we will be sure to give you a call once he made his decision." The applicant stood by, staring at Jonah, not understanding what he was implying. "You can go now." The applicant laughed. "Right on," and proceeded to leave the room. God slammed his head repeatedly on his desk and then held 5 fingers up to Jonah. 5-minute break, please, Jonah." Jonah chuckled slightly, grabbed a stack of resumes, and tapped the edges to align them. "We just had one." Let's go until we interview 30 applicants. Jonah pressed on the intercom in front of him. Enter number 25. So this moment here that I kind of wrote about with the, I guess you could say, a hippie kind of applying for a position of leadership is kind of my way of kind of like political satire. I understood when I was writing this scene for my master's project that this scene, the moments of politics, like a real world thing where an employer kind of interviews potential job potential people for like a position of a job is kind of a boring concept in total in itself. I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but my idea with creating this was kind of opening up the comedic scene before kind of leading into kind of a more serious situation. So my idea with creating this kind of hippie guy, I guess you could say, that didn't really know what he was applying for, was kind of like out of place, I guess you could say. It was really kind of meant to be my idea of comedy. God crashed his head on his desk and made a loud audible groan. A man walked in. His shoes were clicking on the laminated wooden floor. He stopped in front of the podium where God and Jonah sat. I gotta go to sleep now? Okay, well, good night. And spoke in a calm and smooth voice. Hello, my name is Ezekiel Graham, and I'm here to apply for the position of elder. God lifted his head. See you soon, buddy. Good night. God lifted his head in interest, eyebrows furrowed as he turned into his adult persona to examine Ezekiel. Ezekiel's body was odd. None of the parts seemed to match each other. He had dark skin with blue eyes, short black hair with a blonde beard, small hands and large feet. It was as if his body was created from a bargain bin of discount body parts, with no care for what parts matched. But what was unnerving to God was that Ezekiel's voice sounded eerily familiar to him, but God did not recognize his face. Ezekiel presented himself as an enigma, or a puzzle to God, one that he was eager to figure out. Jonah was unfazed by Ezekiel's appearance and formed the interview as usual. Right, Ezekiel, tell me about yourself. Ezekiel spoke in a monotone manner that lacked any inflection or tone whatsoever. I graduated at the top of my class at Oxford University in 1476, where I got a Master's of Arts in Rhetoric, though I often found myself studying Greek literature. I also studied the writings of Marcus Tullius Cicero for my degree. God shuffled through a stack of unopened resumes on his desk that was still in the middle of the folder. He withdrew Ezekiel's resume and used a small compact device to scan the document, before using it to type something into the gadget. Jonah tried to ignore him as he continued to converse with Ezekiel. Very impressive. You have 2 positions of elder available. Which one did you want to apply for? Ezekiel spoke, not looking at Jonah with a blank expression on his face. I wanted to apply for the position that Gabriel had. Ezekiel turned to gaze at God, who looked up in interest. I understand he was a friend of yours, God. God glared at Ezekiel in mild annoyance. And how do you know that? Ezekiel responded with a fake smile on his emotionless face. Everyone knows how important God was to you. He was there since the beginning of time. Jonah's face grew white. Very few people in heaven had knowledge of God and what happened in the beginning, and the fact that this stranger knew of God filled him with worry. God stood up, face red with anger as he shouted, I don't know who exactly you are, but your resume is a sham. You never attended Oxford University. No one matches your description who attended it at that time. What unsettles me the most is yourself. Everything about you presents itself as an enigma. Your body does not match at all, and your voice. Who are you, really? Ezekiel showed his false smile as he stated, I want to be your friend, Jehovah. God's face grew red as he ordered, Guards, arrest this man. A group of heaven's guardsmen, the police force of heaven, entered the room and locked Ezekiel in place, holding his arms to prohibit movement. Ezekiel still had a false smile on his face, not the least bit concerned. So it has come to this, Jehovah. God descended from the platform and approached Ezekiel in his elder persona. I haven't gotten under that name in what feels like a thousand of years. Another inaccuracy in my story since I wrote this project. It has been 1,000 years exactly since God had used that persona of Jehovah. This was still kind of in the plot line that I had when I was developing the project. that God created the persona of God 2,000 years ago when it was actually changed to be 1,000 years ago since I finished drafting book 1. Who are you really? How long has it been since I left heaven? How long has it been since you unjustly imprisoned Samael in hell for doing what he thought was the right thing? You were once referred to as the Bright One, a name given to one of the smartest minds of our people. Ezekiel paused and gave God a stern look. I'm still waiting for an apology. God had not heard the term Bright One used in a long time. It was once the most venerated of titles given among his people. It was a title he'd earned after centuries of arduous work and study. God knew that Ezekiel Graham was one of 3 individuals who left him after he had imprisoned Samael. One of those members was one of the sharpest minds he knew. The other 2 were some of the strongest individuals in terms of combat prowess. The question remained, which one was Ezekiel? God gave Ezekiel a stern look. I will apologize as soon as you tell me who you are. Ezekiel laughed at him for the first time, not a fake one. Ask Proviel. He was the one who asked me to do this. All I did was stoke the embers. However, I will not be held in your prison. We will meet again, Jehovah. Ezekiel broke an arm free of the guard's grip and clicked the device, sending him away in a burst of light. God recognized it as being an invention of his colleague Proviel, who created the dimensions that heaven and hell resided in. Jonah came down, stunned as he had never seen something like that take place. What happened? Where did he go? A smile grew on God's face as gears were beginning to turn in his mind. He disappeared. I have a theory as to who he is, but I need to talk to Proviel first. Let's start the interviews for today. I need some time to think. Jonah nodded in agreement as God led him through a portal. He had been around God long enough to know that once his mind had fixated on something, he cannot rest until he had brought it to his conclusion. Despite that, Jonah was overcome with worry. Ezekiel Graham had in-depth knowledge on who God was, but the question remained, was he a threat or an ally? He wasn't around at the beginning, but he had enough information to know the events that took place. God was not perfect, and one of his biggest mistakes had created a divide among his people. Some had remained loyal to him, while others have either betrayed him or went into hiding. As to which one Ezekiel was, Jonah knew that only time would tell. He just hoped that this wouldn't cause any more problems for the Society of Heaven. So my creation of Ezekiel Graham in this section is actually kind of like an interesting story. When I was still in junior high, it was about like 2009, 2008, if I'm doing my math right. I actually went out to dinner with my mom and my grandpa, and grandpa, I should say. And we were kind of discussing about my topic of writing and like what I was thinking about. This time I was drafting a book that ended up like didn't really go anywhere. And he asked me, my grandpa asked me what pen name I would use, if I would use a pen name, like a different name other than my own. And I've been toying with that idea for a while, and the name I came up with was Ezekiel Graham. And as soon as I brought that up, my grandpa started laughing, and he literally said, "That's fucking stupid." My mom was laughing too, and because of that response, I ended up just not going for that pen name, and I ended up just going for my actual name when writing this project. And but I do still like Ezekiel Graham as a name in general, so I ended up using it to kind of be essentially like a name for this character, this presented character. Ezekiel Graham in this section is kind of meant to be like a sort of mysterious figure. This is actually kind of revealed. His identity is kind of revealed later on in the story. The story, what it was kind of accusing God of, like some of the things it was kind of bringing up about like God being the bright one, the topic of what Jehovah meant. There are some things that have changed since developing the project. My first book. I stated in this project that it took God centuries of study and work, hard work and study for him to attain the title Jehovah. Basically, within my story, Jehovah is a title that essentially is given among people who are considered to be the most intelligent. It kind of takes, it's sort of like a test composed of every single subject, every single field of study in existence. And if you are able to pass that test, you are been given the title of Jehovah. The test is so difficult, and more stuff keeps on being added as new theories and new things are being invented, that it has not, no person has attained the title of Jehovah in thousands and thousands of years of my story. And God was described as one of the first people to attain the title of Jehovah. But he did not spend a couple hundred years of studying for that. He is kind of meant to be sort of like a prodigal figure in my story, and he only really spent like a month or a couple months studying before he took the test, and he did actually, when he did get the title of Jehovah, and basically when he got that title of Jehovah, it actually permitted him to be able to pursue any career, any sort of scientific career he wanted, because he was essentially described as an expert in all fields with that title Jehovah. So that is kind of like what Jehovah is kind of meant to represent. This event, this test that God took for that title, it took place before the creation of the universe and God and his people's own home. And I will be discussing more about that much later as the series develops. But the other thing I want to say is Jehovah is also representative of the God's previous personality, his original form, I guess you could say. That kind of led to like a moment of conflict within God, and was kind of the reason why he abandoned the persona of Jehovah and created like his three personalities of God. And I will be discussing more about that possibly later. Much later, actually, when I am discussing the later section of God, perspective of God. But he essentially views the persona of Jehovah as sort of like a mistake that he made, like a reminder of the mistakes he made at that persona. And again, I will be discussing the persona of Jehovah more, but basically, one way you can think of it is Jehovah is representative of how God is portrayed in the Old Testament, while God is representative of how God is portrayed in the New Testament. In the Old Testament, God is kind of depicted as sort of like an all-powerful entity. I remember there's a story where he turned, I think it was Lot, to a pillar of salt, because she turned around to look at the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, and she witnessed God's power, and she was turned to salt because of that. There were so many stories of God just kind of using like divine like punishment or retribution, I guess you could say, against people that were against him. And he was often kind of described as wrathful in the Old Testament. Meanwhile, one of the major themes in the New Testament was how Jesus, the Son of God, was essentially kind of more so described as a figure of forgiveness. The God portrayed in the New Testament is really completely different to the God that's portrayed in the Old Testament. The main theme with the New Testament is you can be forgiven from your sins if you only ask for God to forgive them, essentially. With the Old Testament, it was sort of like, follow my orders or I'll punish you. That's kind of like a really kind of like very short way and possibly an accurate way to describe how God was portrayed in the Old Testament. But that's kind of like what I kind of got from reading the Old Testament when I was still religious. But that's kind of like the differences between God and Jehovah, where Jehovah is kind of meant to represent the character of God in the Old Testament. Well, God is meant to represent the character of God in the New Testament. And that's actually going to be all I am going to be reading for today. Before we wrap things up, once again, there is a publication warning, something I should have discussed earlier. This project was published from a university. It does have a copyright thing to that. Basically, it says it cannot be reprinted or reproduced in any manner unacceptable to the usual copyright restrictions without the written permission of the author. I'm assuming by reproduced, it could be meant like me streaming this document. Just wanted to put this out there in case you are watching this. If you are working on Twitch or YouTube in the future, I am the author of this document. My name is Zachary Bennett. I give myself permission to discuss and analyze my creative work. There's something I should have done at the beginning, but I forgot. That being said, next time we will be streaming this. We'll be continuing to read this story next Thursday, 1 p.m. to 3 Pacific Standard Time. We are going to be reading. Just going to go back down to here. We read the first 3 perspectives. Next perspectives, we will be reading perspectives of Michael, Alec Lowe, Elizabeth Hart, and actually, we'll probably read it from Michael to Hefe, depending on how I feel. But that's going to be what we're going to be covering on next Thursday, 1 p.m. to 3 Pacific Standard Time. We're going to be continuing reading and discussing my creative project, these next 4 sections of my story. And the other thing I want to say was, if you are interested in seeing more of my content, I will be streaming Sims 3 Past 1% Completion on Fridays, 1 p.m. to 5 Pacific Standard Time. I'm going to be streaming Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, assuming I don't have insomnia like what happened last week. And I'll be streaming that on Saturdays, 1 p.m. to 5 Pacific Standard Time. And I will be streaming Assassin's Creed Syndicate for 1% Completion on Sundays, 1 p.m. to 5 Pacific Standard Time. That's going to do it for today. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all next time.